Param Vijayate Shri Kṛṣṇa Sankirtanam, total world victory of Hare Krishna. Welcome to today's episode of Bhagavad-gita As It Is. My name is Sitapati Das.
And my name is Dana Devi.
And today we are doing Bhagavad-gita, the Song of God, as it is, by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Chapter 5, text number 21.
21 already.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let me put the banner, because we want to do this banner down here. 521. It's a famous purport, one that I remember. I was just looking at it and going like, yeah, I'm not really familiar with this chapter that as much as the previous ones, but this one I definitely remember. I remember commenting on this previously. Here we go. Bāhya-sparśeṣv asakta-ātmā vindati ātmani yat sukham brahma-yoga-yuktātmā sukham akṣayam aśnute. Can you see from there?
Maybe if you can
Make it bigger?
Please.
Well, not that one. This one. Must? On must.
I'm gonna shoot up rope. Yes, it's
Bāhya-sparśeṣu.
in internal sense pleasure. External, sorry,
Yes.
sense pleasure.
Asakta-ātmā.
One who is not so attached,
Vindati.
enjoys
ātmani.
in the self,
Yat.
that which
Sukham.
happiness,
Saha.
that
Brahma-yoga.
concentrated in Brahman,
Yukta-ātmā.
self-connected,
Sukham.
happiness,
akṣayam.
unlimited,
aśnute.
enjoys.
Translation. You read the translation.
See. Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure or external objects, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, for he concentrates on the Supreme. Jai.
Purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Śrī Yāmunācārya, a great devotee in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, said, Yadavadhi mama cheta Kṛṣṇa padarvinde nava navarasa dhammanudyatarantum asit tadavadi pattanari sangame smaryamane bhavati mukha vikara shushtu nishtivanam cha. Since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Kṛṣṇa, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought, and my lips curl with distaste. A person in Brahma-yoga, or Kṛṣṇa consciousness, is so absorbed in the loving service of the Lord that he loses his taste for material sense pleasure altogether. The highest pleasure, in terms of matter, is sex pleasure. The whole world is moving under its spell. The materialist cannot work at all without this motivation. But a person engaged in Kṛṣṇa consciousness can work with greater vigor without sex pleasure, which he avoids. That is the test in spiritual realization. Spiritual realization and sex pleasure go ill together. A Kṛṣṇa conscious person is not attracted to any kind of sense pleasure due to his being a liberated soul. Om Jnanatirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Enmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Let's have a look at the changes first. Not attracted to sense, pleasure, or external objects. That's been changed. Material, sense, pleasure, or external objects. So the or external objects was not there in the original manuscript.
And they added on.
Hayagriva has added it in.
Okay.
Second edition, it's been taken out at some point. Some stylistic changes there. A comma added here. Comma taken out here. And that's it for this one. There have been changes made to the word for word. Saha, that, has gone to he. Saha, that. So Srila Prabhupada had that, they changed it to he. By concentration in Brahman, Brahma Yoga changed from concentrated in Brahman. So yeah, in the second edition, they've gone in and changed the word for words away from what Srila Prabhupada had put. Yeah, bogus. On the matter of the changes, before we go to the verse, I found this, which I wrote in 2009. I'll add it in here so we can see it. This is from the Wayback Machine, which is an internet archive of my blog. This is from 2009.
What was it about?
Well, I was at the Saturday night feast at the Brisbane Temple. Pretty sure that's where this is. No, this is at New Govardhan. This is in New Govardhan, and you're looking into the temple room. See someone offering their obeisances in there?
That's different.
That's the opening. That's the entrance to the temple at New Govardhan. So we're sitting outside the temple room at New Govardhan at the Sunday feast. This is Madan Mohan Das Brahmachari. I don't know what he's doing these days. Madan Mohan. After not seeing him for a year or more, a couple of days ago, I started thinking of him, wondering when I'd see him again, and then I see him. Now, he was somehow involved in Mayapur with the GBC and everything, and he'd been in meetings about Resolution 311, to annotate Srila Prabhupada's books.
Yeah.
So here's what I picked up from his conversation, right? Edition 0, Prabhupada's Indian Bhagavatam, the first edition of the Bhagavatam, first canto, and Easy Journey to Other Planets, which were re-edited and republished in a first edition form. I don't think anyone is arguing for a return to these as the most authentic version, so please don't bring it up as a straw man. First edition. These books are the original editions of Srila Prabhupada's books. Edition 1.5 covers the BBT publishing of the Bhagavad-gita in the form that Srila Prabhupada wanted it. That's the Macmillan. The first one was reduced in size by the initial publisher. So that was the 68. For the first edition of the books, editors would change things that Srila Prabhupada had written, sometimes in consultation, sometimes without consultation, on Srila Prabhupada's order and with his permission. These changes were made to increase clarity and force, as Srila Prabhupada requested them to do. This edition of the books is the one accepted by the Ritvik movement and a small but significant number of other devotees, now including us. Growing. Second edition. Remember, I wrote this in January of 2009. Second edition of the books came about after Srila Prabhupada's disappearance. This was due to the realization that the first edition editors had misheard or mistyped things that Srila Prabhupada had said or written when he was generating the books. Some were manuscripted, some were dictated. Due to a lack of familiarity with the subject matter, they were basically hearing all of this for the first time. Editors had incorrectly interpreted terms. Now, this, of course, is, the standard accepted, story about the second edition.
Okay.
The second edition editors were able to consult the original source materials and bring the second edition books more closely in alignment with Srila Prabhupada's original source material. Where a term might have been misunderstood previously, it was clearer which of the possibilities, for example, Brahma versus Brahman, is consonant with the philosophy to editors now familiar with the subject matter. His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami has given examples of justifications for changes that were made, and in theory, all the changes that were made can be justified in this way. Even in 2009, without having examined it, I could understand the limitations on this, right? It's like, in theory, they can all be justified in this way. Doesn't mean that they are, but in theory, they can. Also, in the second edition, some partial quotations of verses were expanded to the full verse, and citations were given showing where the verse comes from.
Mhm.
I was talking with Gora Prabhu earlier today, and I mentioned this from us going through the Bhagavad-gita from, I think we started in the second chapter
No.
to the, or
part
do
of
we
the
start in the
first.
first? So we started in
Yeah.
the first chapter, and we're now in the fifth of examining the changes, the change between the editions, the justifications, the original manuscript. This is one of the categories of the changes that I mentioned to him, citations of where verses came from, right?
Mhm.
The purpose of the second edition is to bring the published books more in line with what Srila Prabhupada wrote.
Mm.
That's the stated purpose, but there's more things going on in there than
Of
that.
course, yeah.
Now we're on to the third edition.
Oh dear.
I said to Gora,
This is a third edition, but it's actually the second edition, but part 3 edition.
yes, the second edition, there is no actual fixed second edition.
No.
But I said to Gora, he who, as Kṛṣṇa says in Bhagavad-gita, he who has no haters has no fans.
Mm.
And he said to me, does he say that in Bhagavad-gita? I said, yeah, it's in the third edition. Okay, but here's the third edition.
Non-existent edition. Okay.
Here we have the edition proposed by Resolution 311.
Okay.
The impetus for the third edition of books comes from the realization of editors that Srila Prabhupada uses some English terms in an archaic form. This is how they were selling it. This took some time to detect because the words that Srila Prabhupada uses are not deprecated in the English language. That is to say, they haven't dropped out of use.
Mm.
However, their meaning has changed. They are words that in Prabhupada's public school Indian English mean one thing, but in modern Western English mean something else. Now I'm just gonna like throw this in as, it's like, for example, when he says, no, I'm not gonna, let's just stay on this.
Okay.
Some commentators on Resolution 311 have interpreted the talk of linguistic shift to apply to linguistic shift in the terms that Srila Prabhupada used between the time he used them and today. However, the sense I picked up in my conversation with Madana Mohan is that the idea is to correct for linguistic shift between the meaning at the time that the words entered into Srila Prabhupada's English and the meaning today. In other words, Prabhupada was using words that communicated something other than what he intended to the general public, both when he wrote them and now. This is so insidious. What they're saying is that, this is exactly literally what he said, but what he really meant was something else. Wow. You're inventing a parokshavad where you can reinterpret what he said. Yeah, we know that that's what he said, but what he actually meant was something else. In other words, it's a theory that Prabhupada's words don't mean what the words, you just say, yeah, exactly. The words have changed. And so, yeah. So here's my commentary. First of all, there are a lot of things mixed together in this. Madan Mohan was telling me that the idea of the second edition was to get the books closer to what Srila Prabhupada said. And the third edition is to get them closer to what Srila Prabhupada wanted to say.
Oh.
I know, right? I might be able to buy into this, except for two things.
Right.
Number one, I haven't seen a complete list of changes between editions 1 and 2 with the justifications. Examples are great, but this is no small matter. This list of changes should be compiled before proposing anything else. To ask for this is not to say, I don't trust you. It's to say, this is a momentous thing. It must be done with gravity and diligence, and it must be seen to be done with gravity and diligence.
Yeah, of course.
The lack of transparency in the process otherwise taints the product. There are significant numbers of devotees today who eschew the second edition books for precisely this reason. To go to a third edition without addressing this dynamic enables further schisms in the society. That's not to say that it will be the primary cause of it, although it may do so. If nothing else, it gives a rallying point for people who could use one. Number two, is it really the case that Srila Prabhupada used an archaic term, or is it just that what he said isn't popular today?
Exactly.
Or is it a mixture of both? And how much of a mixture? And in what way? This is a real concern. From the, and they always are, liberal intellectual viewpoint, persuasively put forward by Madana Mohan Prabhu, the idea is simply to make Srila Prabhupada's presentation closer to his intent. Not by changing the term in the book, but by adding an associated note, a footnote or an appendix
Mhm.
that presents only what Srila Prabhupada said in other places to clarify his overall intended meaning. It's a Brahminical and Sattvic idea. And you know what? It's actually what Kṛṣṇa Prabhu does in his book,
Mhm.
Tough Questions, Difficult Answers.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how Kṛṣṇa Prabhu approached in his book. And I think doing it in that book was good. However, from what I read around the GBC, see, the thing is, I can agree or disagree with some of the things in Kṛṣṇa's book,
Of course.
but they haven't whacked it into Prabhupada's book.
Mm.
And that's good. And I appreciate and respect him for doing it in that way.
Mhm.
However, from what I read around the GBC proposal, this is not simply an ivory tower discussion of, hey, this term is actually archaic in its usage. We can clarify the meaning. Rather, it is driven by a public backlash against the content of the books.
Mhm.
How this would influence the process of clarifying the meaning is a concern, especially if at the same time intellectuals insist that it is simply an academic exercise. It's not.
Mhm.
It's meant to achieve a specific goal. It's not simply standards driven. Let's make this thing more accurate to an objective standard. It's consequential.
Mhm.
Let's get a specific result by doing this.
Mm.
As a thought experiment, would there be momentum or motivation for Resolution 311 if there were no public backlash against the statements by Srila Prabhupada? And this is the whole thing. Kṛṣṇa is transparent. The motivation is people criticizing on Wikipedia.
Right.
And as I've said it before, it's like, it's not Srila Prabhupada's cultural conditioning that's the issue.
Mhm.
It's the cultural conditioning of people today
Mhm.
that has them reject what Srila Prabhupada said. And then it's like, oh, it's his cultural conditioning. The things where, in quotes, Srila Prabhupada's cultural conditioning, or in other words, his statements,
Mhm.
don't conflict with the cultural conditioning of people today. No one says, well, you know what? Srila Prabhupada's cultural conditioning should be changed along with everyone else's. You know, it's only the things where the popular outcry
Mhm.
drives it where that's an issue.
Right.
So there would be no momentum or motivation. There's literally, I can't think of a single example where there's a momentum and a motivation to change something that Srila Prabhupada wrote that's not driven by public outcry of the culturally conditioned people of today.
Of course.
Yeah, so
We are culturally conditioned everywhere now.
So it's obvious from Resolution 311 that the perception of the public is a significant driving force.
Mm.
Now, my argument. Back in 2009, I had time to write stuff like this.
You must have a lot of time for yourself.
It is a fact, number one, it is a fact that Srila Prabhupada makes many statements that are at odds with presently accepted standards and will not be palatable to a contemporary Western audience.
Mm-mm.
Two, it may also be a fact some of the statements he makes may be misinterpreted due to his use of an archaic term that was not recognized as such by first edition editors. These are two different points.
Yeah.
Which have been conflated in Resolution 311.
Mm.
They pretend that what they're doing is number two, when actually number one is what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
GBC managers want books that do not cause people to reject them and interfere with the preaching and spread of the movement. ISKCON intellectuals want books that accurately reflect what Srila Prabhupada was trying to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
no matter how unpopular it is.
Mm.
They should use the correct word so that Srila Prabhupada's intended meaning is evoked in the mind of the reader and not some other incorrect understanding of his point.
Exactly.
These are two parallel agendas which may sometimes be in line with each other, but also may sometimes be at odds. Without seeing the due diligence of publicly recording the first to second edition changes and their justifications, I do not have confidence that the BBT is able to do this work in a way that would not cause a massive schism in the society.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to reject the third edition books on principle.
Yeah.
Not because I knew or even thought that they had been changed in a way that altered their meaning away from what Srila Prabhupada intended, but because the process surrounding this change was improper.
Mm-hmm.
If done improperly, it opens the gate to unmonitored changes in Srila Prabhupada's books,
Mm-hmm.
or it opens Srila Prabhupada's books to allegations of unmonitored changes.
Exactly.
Both of these taint Srila Prabhupada's reputation. And
Totally.
once I actually started to examine in detail the first, that's why I became so enraged.
Yeah, I would be as well.
Yeah, because you can see even in 2009, I was already like thinking along these lines.
Yeah.
Of course, a counter argument would be that currently Srila Prabhupada's reputation is being unjustly tainted by misinterpretation of his works due to use of archaic meanings of English terms and the reduced competence of his editors, understandably, who are only now figuring this out. This is how they argue for the second edition, right?
Mm.
I have no problem with that, but I don't want to see one problem turn into 10. This should be done very, very carefully. The lessons of the first or second edition should be visibly learned and the issues addressed, and they're still not. And this was in 2009, and it's almost 2024, which puts us like 15 years after I wrote this.
Wow. Yeah.
There should be more public discussion around the various motives behind Resolution 311, clarifying them, identifying their strengths and potential weaknesses, and discussing how they interact and what systems would be put into place to safeguard against excesses. Madana Mohan doesn't see the third edition as anything more than a logical extension of the second edition, making the books more true to their function of accurately conveying Srila Prabhupada's message to a contemporary audience. However, there is another agenda. It's not sinister, it's just practical, making the books more palatable to a contemporary audience.
Well, we can say it's not sinister, but you don't know. It's becoming kind of sinister now.
The way that they're going about it.
Yeah, it's kind of sinister. And God knows, in 20 years' time, the whole meaning is going to change.
The difference between the two is subtle, but in due course of time, if one is conflated with the other, as they presently are, the inevitable result will be deviation.
Totally.
Conflating those two things together. Listen to this. But making the books more palatable to a contemporary audience is exactly what Srila Prabhupada wanted. If it meant changing words or entire passages from his archaic terminology, so be it. We must save ISKCON from Srila Prabhupada. This guy's joking. This is all silly and dangerous. The solution is simple. Go back to the original first edition books. Implement the changes that Srila Prabhupada specifically requested and be done with it. This desire to always change things will ruin everything.
Totally.
At the very least, keep the first edition books in print. Right now, you can't get Nectar of Devotion, Teachings of Queen Kunti, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and a few others in any edition. That was 2009, January the 12th. So it's interesting because, you know, people are on Facebook at the moment saying like, oh, Sitapati has changed. You know, he used to be like this enthusiastic kirtaniya, and he used to be like really compassionate, and now he's become a right-wing conspiracy theorist.
Wow.
And I'm like, I don't think that's true. And then I go back and I examine it, and I'm like, I have literally exactly the same positions on all of these things now that I had back then. I haven't changed.
Yeah, some people are just silly to make that judgment for some reason.
Well,
maybe
it's like the frog in the water that's slowly heating up, right? And then because it slowly heats up, the frog doesn't jump out. I'm still at the same temperature. I haven't changed. And they're like, oh, you've changed. You've become a right-wing extremist, a conspiracy theorist, you know? I'm like, dude, I'm saying the same things that I was saying then.
Yeah.
I might be saying them with a bit more passion now, but I haven't changed. I think you've changed. And I think you haven't noticed that. People who are saying this to me. It's you who've changed.
As far as the enthusiastic with Sankirtan is, I think you've always been very enthusiastic, and I always see you very enthusiastic, very committed, passionate about Harinams. Yeah.
It's my jam.
Yeah. And then you're genuine in that area. You're very sincere in that area. You're very driven in that area. And people can say whatever they want to say, but my first-hand experience is like, yeah, this is how it should be. This is the power of a man with so much love for Harinam and the instructions of Prabhupada. What I can see in you.
Someone said he's become anti-woman and anti-gay.
He's married to a woman.
I know, it's kind of crazy. I'll tell you who's anti-women. Gay men. Let's go back to the verse. Have a look at this.
Yeah, the comment of the person that said about the
Yeah, I know. You're going to have a thing about that. Śrī
like,
Yāmunācārya, right?
she's, what was it? Just they say, oh, she's dangerous or
What's that?
anti.
Oh, talking about you,
Yeah. There's something about
go
the
back to that.
anti-me or being dangerous,
anti-gay or something.
Anti-gay.
Oh no, they
like,
said that we both have dangerous mental illness.
okay. Oh yeah. Even yeah. Mental illness. Thank you. I don't know what psychiatric training they have to. Thank you. I do need it.
None.
Psychiatric training they have to be doing the diagnosis online. Yeah.
It's no, but this is the thing, is like, it's called ad hominem, right?
Mm-hmm.
You disagree with someone, but rather than state, like that thing that we were just looking at, that article I wrote, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's me sitting down with this guy and talking with him and examining, the different aspects of it, and being like, I don't agree with this. Like, there's things, and they're like, I don't agree with the way the first, second edition was done, without a transparent ledger of like everything that had been changed, and the fact that they say that this is what they did, but you haven't actually demonstrated it, so you could be lying. And apart from that, it's not just to say that I don't trust you, you could be lying. It's like it is a grave and momentous thing to do, and it should be seen to be grave and momentous.
And I really appreciate that you are but you are a critical thinker, and you express the dangers of things that you see, the possible things, because you're thinking critically. Okay, this is what it is. So in the future could have happened this. You point all of the things there. Some people are just like, oh, whatever. They don't have this ability to critically think and examine things, and they just go with the flow. That's what the mantra these days is: just go with the flow. And I appreciate that, because it takes courage to be that person, critically thinking about things and saying what you think, rather than just like putting it inside and living with that turmoil of like not speaking your own truth.
Yeah.
And
I didn't just, it was, this whole first, second to first edition thing. It's not a knee-jerk thing. You can see, I was thinking about it 14 years ago. I wrote that article in 2008 about resolution 311. I contributed to defeating it. And now that I am doing the work myself, because they just haven't done it. Gora asked me if I'm going to write a book about it.
Will be good to do it.
It would be a small book.
It will be a small book, but the
pamphlet.
The teaching here would be how people should be critical thinking, because the rationale is here. You give the rationale. People think when you give the rationale, like Srila Prabhupada always gave the analogy to make people understand, and we're like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. So using analogies, using the rationale, then you will get into the thinking of people, because these days it's quite hard for people to think critically. They just follow, and they don't want to take responsibility. They don't want to think about the consequences of their own actions, the impact that has, the effect that has in other people. They don't want to do that.
I don't know if that's even just people these days. I think it could be an increase in people these days, but the other thing is there are Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras among the population by nature.
And the Brahmana should be way more what do you call it? Scrutinizing in this kind of work. Absolutely very powerful, enraged about these kind of changes.
Yeah, they have to be independently thoughtful and independent in their means.
Yeah.
There aren't many people like that. And ISKCON really doesn't like those people as an organization.
Absolutely not.
Sulochan, Kundali, people who are independently thoughtful, and they get called critics,
Dangerous.
Because they
are labeled as dangerous, because you know what? Just let's be honest. This is the whole truth. If you don't think critically, if you don't observe and say things as they are, then who is this going to do? obviously that the kind of things is not going to favor to their goal they want to get to. It's not favorable. And obviously they're going to go hardcore on you on doing something very simple as that, and very honestly and loyally and truthfully as that.
Yeah, part of what keeps the whole second edition thing in place is it's another one of those things. Adolf Hitler said it in Mein Kampf, that because your average person wouldn't even think, he might hesitate to even lie about a $5 thing on his income tax. He's not going to lie about 5 million, 500 million, 5 billion, $5 trillion. He couldn't even conceive of that. He can't think that anyone would do that. So, it's like if you're not, a cheater yourself, you're not going to think that, that they could do something on that scale.
I know.
But even I just said to Gora about the thing, there are changes in the first or second edition that are stylistic edits that Jayadvaita Swami has done, where he's gone in there and he's just gone, I don't like the way that he edited that, and then he's edited it the way that he wants to do it. And there's even one I found where he wrote to Hayagriva at the time and said, should we do it as option A or option B? Change this. And Hayagriva said, no, leave it as it is. Don't change it.
Yeah.
There's no error in it. There's no lack of clarity in the meaning. But then in the second edition, in 1983, Jayadvaita Swami went and changed it to option A that he wanted to do. Now, I agree with his editorial sense. When I read it, before I looked at the changes and anything, I thought exactly the same thing. It's an awkward phrasing to me. And I was like, well, I would have phrased it as either this or this.
Yeah.
And when I found the letter and Jayadvaita Swami proposed those two things, I was like, yeah, man, we're on the same page. But the thing is that that's not a category of edits that he says that he's doing. He tells you that he's changing, everything here. Like those list of those things, critical errors, things that were misheard, but not like stylistic changes that I want to do. He's not saying that he's doing that. And there's a category of changes that are like that. And then there's another category of changes, which is Prabhupada said this, but this is even better. That's another category that's not in there. And that violates completely the idea that it's getting it closer to what Prabhupada said, because it's not.
No.
It's not. It is in some cases, but that's not the overall editing philosophy.
Well, there is kind of rare cases that you see that. So far, I think we found one or two.
Going back closer to what Srila Prabhupada said? Well, there's
not closer, but
more accurately to Prabhupada's manuscript.
Yeah, some sort of like a comma or some sort of like addition, I think.
Yeah,
and then closer, just to give it a little bit more of a body or whatever. I don't know how to express it. To make a bit more sense of the whole sentence of the sentence. Yeah, but
so you mean the sentence has been edited?
Yeah, for example, changing the comma insert. I think there was one.
Well, I mean,
I think something was like, okay, that makes
in today's
sense.
There's commas edited.
Or grammatically changing this for that. It was like, okay, that makes more sense. But
yeah, like there's a comma has been taken out here. Since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Kṛṣṇa, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought. And there used to be, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought.
There's a lot of Swamis like to talk about this.
About what?
Like, this, whoever was this Prabhu who wrote
Yāmunācārya?
About like, whenever I think about the sex pleasure, spit of the thought, and they're talking about like, ladies and married life. Like,
yeah, they seem to meditate on a lot, huh?
Yeah, they do meditate a lot. Never saw that they're gonna talk a lot about sex life when they could be talking about like empowering the people, values, principles, and what Srila Prabhupada and Kṛṣṇa himself did.
Yeah, like being focused out here on something in the world, in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, rather than. But then at the same time, Srila Prabhupada himself is talking about it quite a lot, right? Because he's talking about it here. Like here we have Yāmunācārya talking about it, but Srila Prabhupada is the one who brings him into this conversation.
Yeah. Oh, of course. But he's not going about that, He has to put touch on this basis just to give an example, This person is thinking about it and he's rejecting all of these other thoughts, because he is in a different level that human beings we are right now.
Mhm.
Many people are thinking about sex even when they are having
Yeah.
sex.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, and this person that is elevated is thinking about getting out of these thoughts and liberating himself for that. And obviously it is good to put that example.
Let me
Mhm.
see if I can open it in here. Let's see if I can do this. I think I can.
I think we're gonna be late for the chickens.
Oh yeah, okay, so yeah, okay. Well, let's skip over it then, but this is from Kante's book, Tough Questions, Difficult Answers. It was in the conversation we were having, and he talks about the letter from from Srila Prabhupada to Lalita Nanda, his disciple. So his disciple Lalita Nanda had run off with a guy because he was a gay.
Oh dear.
He had run off with a guy, and Srila Prabhupada wrote to him and said, let's have a look. Dun, dun, dun. It will not, I'm very sorry you have taken to homosex. It will not help you advance in your attempt for spiritual life. In fact, it will only hamper your advancement. I do not know why you've taken to such abominable activities. What can I say? Anyway, try to render whatever service you can to Kṛṣṇa, even though you're in a very degraded condition. Kṛṣṇa, being pleased with your service attitude, can pick you up from your fallen state. You should stop this homosex immediately. It is illicit sex. Otherwise, your chances of advancing in spiritual life are nil. Show Kṛṣṇa you are serious if you are. Letter to Lalita Nanda, 26 May 1975. So Kante makes an interesting point here. And this is to this idea of like bringing other things that Srila Prabhupada said. Like, you want to bring something else that Srila Prabhupada said? Well, he also said this, So the point here is that in this particular case, Srila Prabhupada is speaking to a gay disciple. So he says, you run off and you're doing this homosex thing, because that's what he's doing. But it's not that Srila Prabhupada would not say the same thing to someone who is heterosexual who ran off and did the same thing. This is the point he's making. He would also say, hey, this illicit sex is not going to help you in your spiritual life. You must stop it. So he would say the same thing. So he's not necessarily ontologically condemning only homosex and not illicit heterosexuality. Heterosex. So that's an interesting point that he makes here. So it's as free. So listen, this is Kante's. He says, so addictions to homosexual practices hamper, take this off, we'll come to here just us. Hamper spiritual life to the point of reducing to nil one's chances of advancing. Nonetheless, devotional service should go on from any condition. Try to render whatever service you can to Kṛṣṇa. At first sight, these appear as indisputably homophobic statements, but we shouldn't forget that Srila Prabhupada decried as poison all forms of illicit sex. Sex outside marriage, or in a narrower definition, sex within wedlock but without reproductive intentions. He lamented when his disciples got ensnared by unrestricted sex in any form, not only of the gay variety. Illicit sex, this is a quote, illicit sex is so dangerous. Everyone will be killed with the illicit sex. And in our society, it is very easy to have affairs. So many girls are there. I can say, don't do this. But if you do, what can I do? This is the poison, illicit sex. And this poison will kill everything. This is the poison. And I cannot understand whether I shall be able to save my disciples from this poison. Conversation in Bombay, 3 January 1975. This should always be kept in mind when analyzing Srila Prabhupada's views on homosexuality. A true homophobe may disdain gay sex, but enthusiastically endorse unrestricted heterosexual frolicking. Not Srila Prabhupada. He admonished against all forms of misuse and abuse of sexuality. A classic Bhagavad-gita Purport reveals the overall Vedic outlook on sex, especially recreational, non-procreational sex. It is said in the Manu Samhita, the Manu Smriti, that lust cannot be satisfied by any amount of sense enjoyment, just as fire is never extinguished by a constant supply of fuel. In the material world, the center of all activities is sex, and thus this material world is called Maitunya Agara, or the shackles of sex life. In the ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. This is the kind of examination that Madana Mohan was saying, that, he was saying that we would gloss the terms and the phrases and the things that Srila Prabhupada said only with other things to build a completer picture, so that people couldn't just like pick on one thing. And that's what he's done here. He's like glossed I made the banner, but I didn't put it on. Show. He's glossed, the homosex is abominable and is demoniac, and is the homosexual appetite of one man for another is abominable and is not for any sane man in the ordinary course of life. Srila Prabhupada make a statement like that in a purport somewhere. But then there's a lot of other things that Srila Prabhupada has said, so he wants to put the different things that Srila Prabhupada has said next to each other, and then examine it to see what's the fuller picture, rather than just one quote out of context. You can agree or disagree with his conclusions or his, where he takes it, but the approach that he's taken to do it, I can get behind it.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you think? What do you want to say something there?
Yeah. It surprised me that Srila Prabhupada said in this particular situation with this person, Lalitananda, he took up into this relationship with another male. And then out of compassion, Srila Prabhupada spoke the truth to him. He said to this young gentleman, what are you doing is basically, you won't progress. You're just going downhill, which is basically in general, right? For everybody else. If we as a couple, we engage in illicit sex, we will be degrading, because it's more about sense enjoyment than actually doing service and procreating a child, right? Now, and it surprised me that people can say, oh, we can take that he was homophobic. Like, how can he be homophobic? He's talking to a person out of love and telling the truth to him. This is the end destination for you. Leave it. Come back to Kṛṣṇa and do some service, and Kṛṣṇa can pick you up. He's like not only compassionate, he's being like very fatherly, very caring about his concern. He's saying the concern to him. My concern is, if you continue with this lifestyle, sense enjoyment in the form that whatever you're picking up, this is the degrading form. This is the end result. And you can, so continue doing this service to Srila, devotional service, and Kṛṣṇa can pick you up even when you are falling. So how optimistic he is. Yeah. That doesn't mean he is homophobic. It surprised me how people, it's not what Srila Prabhupada actually, is intending to say. It is just people are taking it as a meaning of like condemning him, and they're making him wrong. Yeah. What's very interesting on that point is at the beginning of this chapter, very powerful distinction that he creates here is about homophobia. Oh dear. Like, Kantev starts off by saying, I never liked the word homophobia. My first minor objection is it's structurally incomplete. The prefix homo simply means same or equal. Comes from Greek homos, one and the same. See if I can do this. Can I? No. So in its present form, homophobia should simply mean fear of the same, which doesn't make sense. But my main issue is that homophobia can be easily and unfairly used to categorically stigmatize as pathological any disinclination toward homosexuality, or to problematize any dissent with demands for homosexuals' rights. The word phobia comes from the Greek word phobos, fear or terror. In English, it refers to a persistent, excessive, and irrational fear of something that's unlikely to cause harm.
like fear, electorophobia, fear of chickens, bibliophobia, fear of books, or triskaidekaphobia, fear of the number 13. The phobic person either tries to avoid what triggers the fear or endures the situation with great anxiety and distress. There's no indication that those branded as homophobes are terrified of homosexuals or feel intense agony in their presence. Do they experience cultural incompatibility and tension? Sure. Prejudice? Perhaps. Discomfort or distaste? Possibly. Loathing? Maybe. But phobia? Nah. The alienist and the neurologist first used homophobia in 1908 as fear of men, related to the earlier word gynophobia, fear of women, coined in 1886 and mostly spelled nowadays as gynophobia. In the 1960s, homophobia was recycled to condemn any form of aversion for homosexuality and homosexuals. The repurposing of the term homophobia was a clever rhetorical and political device. If you do not unconditionally embrace homosexuality as normal, whatever that means, or if you do not unreservedly support the homosexual's legal aspirations, you are mentally sick. Any visceral disinclination or intellectual disagreement with any dimension of the homosexual agenda can be, and often is, summarily branded as homophobic, a deviant, neurotic attitude. To classify someone as homophobe is, every so often, a cheap shot. I must admit that the remodeling and weaponization of the term homophobia, first used in writing with that sense in 1969, was a shrewd cultural stratagem. The expression has been influential in reversing the public perception from taking homosexuality as a problem or an illness to seeing hostility towards homosexuality as a problem or an illness. Smart, huh? It communicates the idea that something is seriously clinically wrong with heterosexuals who dislike homosexuality in any of its manifestations. Labels do impact and shape how we think about subjects. The term homophobia soon became an important lexical tool in gay and lesbian activism, despite its non-scientific and semantically awkward origin. Psychology professor Gregory M. Herrick, who conducted extensive research on prejudice against sexual minorities, coined the expression sexual prejudice as a replacement for the term homophobia. Herrick writes, ironically, labeling homophobia a mental disorder has something in common with the erroneous classification of homosexuality as a sickness prior to 1973. In both cases, a diagnostic label is used to stigmatize a disliked pattern of thought and behavior. Using the label misrepresents what really is a subjective value judgment as a scientific, empirically grounded conclusion. And that, I think, is at the source of, that devotee on Facebook being like, oh, they've got serious mental illness. He's like basing it on this. Like any disinclination or any dissent for the legal aspirations of homosexuals as a group is now classified as homophobia, stigmatized, and classified as some kind of mental illness or sickness.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's interesting that this is the beginning of Conte's chapter on this. People call Prabhupada homophobic, but Conte here is deconstructing what homophobic really means. What do people really mean by that? This is Brahminical thought. This is the thinking of a Brahmana.
Right.
Okay, we need to deal with it. Therefore, back to the crucial question, was Srila Prabhupada a homophobe? Whatever that means. In my mind, the answer is not so clear-cut. If we take homophobe to mean someone hostile toward gay men or lesbians, the answer would be no. Srila Prabhupada wasn't hostile to homosexuals. He engaged them in bhakti yoga as every other human being. He treated them with cordiality and affection. In at least one case, he even appointed a gay man as a member of the governing body commission, the highest ecclesiastical council of his International Society for Kṛṣṇa Consciousness, awarding that person also the order of renunciation, sannyas, the highest of the 4 phases of socio-spiritual classification. Ooh, one characteristic of homophobes is discrimination.
Did he know about it though, Srila Prabhupada?
I think he must have. I don't know.
I guess these people are quite good at hiding
Maybe he didn't. I don't know.
really, really good at hiding. So probably he wasn't
Well,
so
he
aware of that.
didn't. It says in at
I think
least
that they're
one
talking
case.
about Kṛṣṇa. Was that the guy that in New Vrindavan?
Well, Kirtanananda and
Kirtanananda.
Bhavananda,
Bhavananda,
two of
these
them, so
yeah.
at least two. One characteristic of homophobes is discrimination against homosexuality, an ethically loaded definition indicating unfair or prejudicial attitudes. Anyway, this next section here, yeah, it's well written. I like it. I don't agree with everything, but yeah, I mean, you could say that those guys, it was a mistake, but then, plenty of the heterosexual guys also, ended off like running off with women, followers, wives of disciples. So it's like,
I know. Well, all are humans, right?
yeah, exactly. And
they
like,
have the extra side personalities, but overall, we have all the four
defects of the conditioned souls. Yeah.
They just top themselves with extra.
And Śrī Yāmunācārya here, he doesn't discriminate. He doesn't say whether it's heterosexual or homosexual. He doesn't care. He's like, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought.
Yeah.
So here you can see Srila Prabhupada is not making a distinction between them here.
No, it's just talking about sex outside of a marriage. And also that this world, the highest pleasure is sex. And this world, the only thing they want to do is the sex pleasure, for what did he say? For not for procreation, but for
recreation.
Recreation. Yeah.
Recreation.
Yeah. Recreational drug.
Yeah, it is. It's you know what?
Mm-hmm.
I think as soon as you back away from sex only for procreation, you immediately run into this problem, And
yeah,
this is an earlier analysis from way back in the day, and that is that sex without procreation is basically there's no difference between that and being gay. It's like, what's the difference?
So it's interesting. Yeah, that's a really good point you make. So if you're having this recreational intimacy with your partner, there is no accountability for it, and then that leads you to be more of promiscuous and looking into that promiscuity outside your relationship. And because within your relationship, you don't want to take responsibility and you don't want to be accountable for the arrival of a new person. It's more about you enjoying, and anybody else that comes in your way or looking for anybody else is just for your sense enjoyment, but no accountability, no responsibility about how the people feel or are. No accountability at all in there. And you're in the biggest danger to basically end up like dogs, the dogs they're having sex, 3-4 dogs and one female dog, they all doing in the streets. And these days is that is becoming, the woman, even married couples, they are like having extra relationships in couples with many other couples. What the heck is this?
Yeah.
Can't believe it.
Yeah, the argument of like, there's not really any ground to stand on if you are recreational heterosexual activity, and then you're going to be against homosexual activity. It really, at that point, does boil down to that's not my personal inclination. I feel disgusted when I think about doing it myself. Therefore, it disgusts me. Therefore, that activity and those people who engage in it are disgusting. And that would be the basic idea of like you're driven by your own personal sexual preference. But otherwise, if you're like condemn illicit sex in all forms, then there is one very limited exception to heterosexual activity that is not of that nature, which is procreation. And of homosexual activity, there is no exception. So it's like 99.9% of heterosexuality is then dismissed, and 100% of homosexual sexual activity is also dismissed.
Yeah, because there is no procreation in there.
Yeah, and so that's Srila Prabhupada's position.
Yeah.
And you could call that homophobic, but
I don't call it homophobic.
Yeah.
It is just the way, I guess, to, to insult him, to pick a fight, to be righteous, to become righteous, and to play the victim.
It's walking back from this position of no sex except for procreation that has led to this issue.
Yeah.
Because if devotees are like no sex except for procreation, then they wouldn't have any problem with that, because homosexual or sexual activity is sex not for procreation.
Yeah.
And so they're just like, we condemn all sexual activity that's not for procreation.
Yeah. So that's basically what it is, I mean, the Bhagavad-gita, you know.
And as far as condemning it, people can do it or whatever, but it's it's not and this is just Srila Prabhupada, you know, it's poison to your spiritual life.
That is true.
It increases the identification with the body.
Not only that, it decreases your ability to use your intelligence. So it's, I don't know what the scriptures, but when a man uses, or not uses, but discharges or waste their semen, I guess. You're wasting your energy. Your intelligence is lesser. Physically, you feel more like, temporarily, of course, you have some sort of like release, but in the long term, you're decaying as a person. Your ability to clearly think, to be strong in your mind, to be strong in physically, it's like diminishing. And it's the same for a female, you know. It is just being like use and use and use and use. There is no benefit to it.
Well, apparently, according to Ayurveda, excessive sex life causes aging for men, and insufficient sex causes aging for women. How's that for a contradiction? Sexual dynamics. Let's go back to the verse to finish, eh?
I don't know how true is that, but anyways, interesting to read that.
Bāhya-sparśeṣv asakta-ātmā vindaty ātmani sukham brahma-yoga-yuktātmā sukham akṣayam aśnute.
Such a liberated person is not attracted to material sense pleasure or external objects, but it's always in trance. Okay, enjoying the pleasure within. In this way, the self-realized person enjoys unlimited happiness, or he concentrates on the Supreme. Jai.
Param Vijayate Śrī Kṛṣṇa Sankirtanam. Total world victory of Hare Kṛṣṇa. Thanks for tuning in. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.